A meeting has been set on December the 13th, 2012 between Iran and the IAEA senior officials. The meeting is being held while both parties feel the need to agree on a modality to continue further talks. This approach was deployed successfully in 2007. The latest IAEA report on Iran, which was issued recently on November the 16th, 2012, confirmed that a new framework can prevent the issue of reaching an impasse. Moreover, the report, like the previous ones, was equivocal in a sense that it simultaneously verified and doubted the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. Now that Western powers leveled vast economical sanctions on Iran to make the country withdraw its nuclear activities, ironically, the IAEA report shows that the Iranian nuclear program is the only sector which has not been affected. In this edition of Iran Today, issues regarding the upcoming meeting between Iran and the IAEA and the agency's recent report will be discussed. Since August 14, 2002, as 2 Iranian nuclear sites were publicly known, Iran's nuclear issue has been widely discussed by Western media, and lots of political pressures were put on the country. In 2003, in its talks with Britain, France and Germany to show its goodwill, the Iranian government of Mohammad Khatami agreed to suspend enrichment in the uranium conversion facility UCF at Esfahan and sign the additional protocols of the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
بعد از اینکه بحث پرونده هسته‌ای جمهوری اسلامی ایران به شکل جدی مطرح شد.
When the issue of Islamic Republic of Iran's nuclear dossier was raised, negotiations between Iran, the IAEA, and 3 EU member countries were initiated to resolve this issue. After a while, the EU acted as the intermediary in these negotiations. The negotiations were carried out between Iran and those 3 European countries. Proposals were transferred to Iran by them. One of the issues that came up was that in order to show its goodwill and to prove it has no clandestine activity and is not willing to move towards making nuclear weapons and willing to make peaceful use of this energy, Iran voluntarily accepted to stop uranium enrichment for a specific period.
All this did not stop the Western countries, especially the US, to impose sanctions against Iran and threaten the country with attacks on its nuclear sites. On August 8, 2005, the Iranian government resumed uranium conversion and in January 2006 broke the seal on the Natanz enrichment facility under the IAEA surveillance. Then, UN Security Council resolutions were passed against Iran, and Western powers, especially the US, started to level unilateral sanctions on the nation.
حرف درستی است به هر حال ایران وقتی تعلیق داوطلبانه غنیسازی اورانیوم رو پذیرفت.
It is a true statement. When Iran accepted voluntary suspension of uranium enrichment and accepted the execution of amended protocol and even started cooperation for its implementation, it had some expectations from the other side. At that time, the 3 EU members, who were the other side of our negotiations and the intermediary between us and the international community, were not either able or willing to fulfill some of Iran's expectations. Maybe external pressures were also being exerted on them. Maybe the US did not want the negotiations proceed in the direction Iran favored. Anyway, all these conditions led Iran to declare that either part of our expectations were not met or the suggestions put forward do not correspond to our expectations, as we had shown our good intentions and had complete cooperation.
2 years later, on July 12, 2007, after several rounds of negotiations between Iran and the IAEA, as well as the EU3, a set of modalities were agreed upon. They concurred that after the implementation of the modalities, the implementation of safeguards in Iran will be conducted in a routine manner.
Well, the Iranians and the IAEA, during the period when Mr. al-Baradei was in charge, reached an agreement to resolve all the remaining issues that existed between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency. And through this, what happened was that the IAEA would give it key questions and Iran would answer them one by one. And whenever each question was satisfactorily answered and the IAEA was satisfied completely with Iran's response, then that question would be set aside.
The agency and Iran cooperated on 6 issues: plutonium experiments, issue of P1P2, source of contamination, U-metal document, PO210, and Gachin mine.
Ambiguities were resolved. The IAEA confirmed that the questions were answered and there is no more ambiguity. At the last stage, when the IAEA was about to remove Iran from this context, as committed previously in the modality, a new issue called alleged studies was introduced, which was essentially out of the framework. The name of the project indicated that it deals with some claims which do not have an accurate base. From this step, our negotiations with the IAEA entered new conditions. The IAEA had violated the previous agreements. We were expecting to receive a clear answer according to the agreements made to put an end to this issue.
The issue of alleged studies reflected in 2007 modality was not a new one. Since 2002, the IAEA stated in its reports on Iran's nuclear activities that it has become concerned about the possible existence in Iran of undisclosed military nuclear-related activities. But it has never presented any reliable and authentic evidence. The latest IAEA's report shows the same questionable concerns.
Of course, we know that there's a con side, negative side to Mr. Amano's report that mentions possible military dimensions of Iran's nuclear program, yet it really lacks any empirical substance. And such allegations are based on very malicious intelligence disinformation and questionable data provided to IAEA.
One of these issues is the case of Parchin. Parchin is an Iranian military complex located about 30 kilometers southeast of Tehran. In a report by the IAEA Director General Yukiya Amano, it is claimed the agency had credible information, which are mainly satellite pictures, that implosion testing had been done in Parchin. But no document or evidence has been presented so far. Iran has been under huge pressure to grant the IAEA inspectors access to the complex. The concern is reflected in the latest report of the agency too.
The IAEA insists on inspecting Parchin complex. Parchin is a place for producing military equipment. And inspecting this place, which has nothing to do with nuclear activities, has not been laid down by the IAEA statute, because it is responsible to monitor all nuclear centers around the world. If a center is not related to nuclear activity, the IAEA is not authorized to inspect it.
Many politicians and experts interpret the West's insistence on visiting Parchin as a move to updating the West's information on Iran's defense development.
Well, Parchin is a part of a large military complex. And what is very important to note is that the IAEA actually inspected Parchin twice and found nothing there. The problem is that the Iranians believe that the United States and its allies are attempting to carry out espionage in Iran through the IAEA. In other words, they constantly give new information that they fabricated themselves so that inspectors would go and visit different sites in Iran so that they could see, for example, the developments taking place in the Iranian military defense capabilities.
The latest IAEA report states that the information on Parchin is provided by member states. The agency refers to some information whose source is not authenticated. Moreover, it says in summary that while the agency testifies the non-diversion of Iranian nuclear facilities, it cannot assure the members about the absence of undeclared nuclear material and activities.
آژانس هم خودش در تمام گزارشاش اینو قید میکنه که تمام این مراکز زیر نظر آژانس هست.
The IAEA has mentioned in all of its reports that all these sites are under its control, but emphasized because the IAEA is not sure about the existence of undeclared centers in Iran, they are worried about them. This way they are accusing Iran of having a secrecy policy. While they have not received any report indicating Iran's violation, the alleged studies is related to the issues that Iran's enemies, including the US and Israel, have repeatedly indicated in their reports and are not willing to take on the responsibility for its consequences. They have submitted these reports to the IAEA without providing any evidence.
اینا رو در اختیار آژانس گذاشته اما حاضر نیستن خودشون بیان رسما اعلام کنن که بابا مستندات این چی هستش.
Under the NPT, Iran's nuclear site has always been regularly inspected by the agency to the point that the number of inspections hit record high. Surveillance cameras have been installed in the sites which provide the agency 24/7 coverage of activities. And any kind of change in the equipment or nuclear materials should be done after the IAEA's observation and measurements.
Mr. Amano's latest report, just like the previous reports, has confirmed once again that there is no evidence of diversion of nuclear material to non-peaceful purposes. And I think that's a key finding of the IAEA that relates to the fact that IAEA has had ample access to Iran's nuclear facilities. It has had short notice inspections of the enrichment facilities. It has surveillance cameras in place, and it can detect any diversion of those enriched material to military purposes. And that gives a lot of confidence to the IAEA and its member states about the peaceful purpose of Iran's nuclear program.
According to the agency's latest report, Iran has produced 7,611 kilograms of UF6 enriched up to 5% uranium-235, of which 735 kilograms has been produced since the agency's report on August 30th, 2012. Iran also produced 232.8 kilograms of UF6, enriched up to 20% uranium-235 to be used in the Tehran research reactor, of which 43.4 kilograms has been produced since August 30th, 2012.
In order to show its goodwill, Iran has not increased the volume of uranium enrichment during this period, while Iran is able to increase it potentially. Also, Iran has not increased the percentage of uranium for its industrial uses and has kept this percentage to 5% and 20% for electricity production and radioisotopes respectively. Iran is able to make uranium enrichment at 30% and 50% for providing ships fuel, but did not do it just to show its good intentions and willingness to cooperation. Also, in terms of the volume of enriched uranium, Iran has endeavored to control it.
The agency's inspections show that the installation of cooling and moderator circuit piping was continuing at the IR-40 reactor at Arak. And Iran indicated that the IR-40 reactor will start to work in 2014. Iran continues its uranium enrichment and nuclear developments, while the US and its allies leveled extensive sanctions on Iran's industry and economy.
گزارش اخیر آقای آمانو هم خیلی خوبه تو این بحث مورد توجه قرار بگیره که
Mr. Amano's recent report is good proof which has to be regarded. It indicates that no change has been made in Iran's nuclear activities after imposing sanctions, Iran's program for producing materials and installing new centrifuges in both Natanz and Fordow has been implemented. So if their concern is Iran's nuclear activities, they have to impose sanctions which hamper Iran's nuclear activities, and in practice, they come to the conclusion that sanctions have hindered nuclear activities. But their sanctions have nothing to do with nuclear activities, and nuclear activities work as a pretext for imposing sanctions. So they are expanding sanctions with no reason.
According to the report, out of 232.8 kilograms of 20% uranium-235, 134.9 kilograms is presently in storage, and 96.3 kilograms, which is over 50% of the storage, has been fed into the fuel plate fabrication plant for conversion to U308. After the conversion, the enriched uranium is going to be used in the Tehran research reactor for medical purposes.
According to the latest IAEA report, Iran has converted some of its 20% enriched uranium into metals, and has left the level of the 20% enriched uranium a little bit above 100 kilograms, and has not accelerated this process too much as a sign of its confidence building with its negotiation partners. And at least that has been the interpretation among the Western nuclear experts, and as a as a sign of Iran's flexibility and willingness to engage in good faith negotiations with the other side.
All Iranian nuclear sites have been open to IAEA inspections, and the latest report confirmed that they have been under the agency safeguards. Contrary to the IAEA verifications of the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear activities, Western media not only shut their eyes to these verifications, but published some stories which are not scientifically correct.
This is something very important, and it is something that the Western media is silent about. In fact, they are completely dishonest about the fact that all of the Iranian nuclear installations are monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And some people actually do not know this, but there are cameras in all these installations filming them day in and day out. And there are permanent representatives and inspectors from the IAEA who actually are based in Iran and can visit these different installations.
Western media try to make a lot of noise about Iran's nuclear activities. Their objective is to poison the atmosphere again. For example, Die Welt, Germany's famous magazine, recently has published Iran is producing plutonium. You know, it is just an elaborate deception. Because they felt desperate, they made this story. Plutonium is 239 uranium. They say Iran wants to make plutonium in Bushehr nuclear plant. It's quite impossible, as Bushehr site is monitored by the IAEA and all its activities are controlled by Russia. Russia does not allow such action to be carried out at any degree. More importantly, plutonium, which is the nuclear waste obtained from the process for producing electricity, is transferred to Russia according to the contract signed in Bushehr. Iran cannot have access to that plutonium. Then how can Iran make nuclear bomb with that plutonium?
The IAEA was founded to accelerate the contribution of atomic energy to peace and prevent the use of the energy for military purposes. It is merely a technical and legal body which shall work under key international conventions and agreements. Iran thinks that the IAEA deviated from its responsibility by politicizing Iran's nuclear case, like what the agency did on February 4, 2006, that reported Iran to the UN Security Council.
The Islamic Republic of Iran has been critical of the activities of the IAEA from the beginning. The Islamic Republic believes the most important technical and legal institute and the most important international reference in the field of nuclear energy should not enter into political issues. Also, its dealings should be according to the framework of its responsibilities in technical and legal issues. Some may think this claim has been made just by the Islamic Republic of Iran, but if we refer to the manifestos made by this movement's members, we will notice this is not just Iran's claim, and non-aligned movement members have criticized IAEA's functioning as its Secretary General. I believe this would be helpful to IAEA to somehow distance itself from being dominated by other powers and fulfill its responsibilities.
I think it's important for people to recognize that the IAEA is not an international body that is democratic. Most of the members of the board are from Western countries. In other words, Western countries dominate the IAEA. It's similar to the UN Security Council, where it's not a democracy. Certain powers have great authority and the ability to veto and to prevent resolutions from being passed. And other countries don't even have any voice in the Security Council. The IAEA has a similar problem. Western powers have the majority. They're able to bully smaller and weaker countries.
The Iranian government believes that concerns stated by the Agency on Undeclared Nuclear Activities has provided the US and Israel with a pretext for threatening Iran with attacks on its nuclear sites.
Usually the reports of IAEA Director General at the time of Mr. El-Baradei and now Mr. Amano have been paradoxical. There are both positive and negative points in these reports. It seems this way of reporting is done intentionally. The IAEA is one of the expert organizations and is affiliated to the UN. Like other international organizations, it can be exerted by superpowers. Therefore, the Director General of IAEA, regarding the present situation of the international system, chooses the genre and type of its reports. So always, both positive and negative points appear in these reports.
On December 1st, 2012, the Iranian ambassador to the International Atomic Agency, Ali Asghar Soltanieh, noted that if there is any attack on Iran, the country will reduce its cooperation with the IAEA or suspend the agency's inspections or even withdraw from the NPT.
طبیعی است که اگر که این فشارها به یه حدی مثل
It is natural when such pressures lead to military invasion and attack on Iran, our effort to cooperate with the IAEA will not have any logical justification from the point of view of our nation. They will ask, why should we continue our membership in the NPT while our enemies disregard their responsibilities toward Iran's rights and have resorted to military attack? I think Mr. Soltanieh's statement was made with such logic.
On May 19th, 2012, Iranian Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Salehi, during Amano's visit to Tehran, said Iran and the IAEA should discuss on a new modality and designate a framework to remove the agency's ambiguities and questions. The latest report of the IAEA notifies the need of a structured approach for further talks too. Therefore, both parties agreed to meet in Tehran on December 13th, 2012.
And I really think that that's a very crucial meeting that could set the tone for the subsequent multilateral meeting between Iran and the 5+1 nations. So a lot hinges on what comes out of the Iran IAEA meeting, and I'm cautiously optimistic in light of the signals that have been sent by both sides on reaching a framework for cooperation and modality in order to resolve the outstanding questions pertaining to the November 2011 report of the General Director and the annex to that report.
It seems that the 2007 modality would be a good pattern for the upcoming talks. Iran favors a modality in which, in return for the country's cooperation, some incentives like lifting all imposed sanctions would be provided, as it was proposed before by Moscow.
Well, a modality is something that is very important for Iran because in the past it was very successful. Under Mr. Al-Baradei, the Iranians and the IAEA resolved key issues. What happened was that the IAEA gave a series of questions, important questions, and the Iranians answered them one by one extensively. And each question that was answered to the satisfaction of the IAEA was considered as resolved. And after a reasonable period of time, all the key issues between Iran and the IAEA had been resolved. What the Iranians are saying now is that the only way to solve the problem is for the IAEA to say what questions they have, and for Iran to give answers. But for the IAEA at some point to say, yes, we are satisfied with this answer, once that Iranians have fed them with all the information.
Iran's nuclear dossier definitely is not just a legal or technical case anymore. For a decade, the West has used it to put Iran under huge pressure. Despite that, the upcoming talks can be an important step for both sides to see eye to eye with each other.